What would you have me to give of myself? I would gladly give. How would you have me to die of myself so that you might live? Come, let me worship you wholly. Come, I will only adore thee. You are my one Lord, my Master, my Savior, my all. Send out your Spirit to guide and to teach me your words of life.
Hello, my name is Sandra Timko, and welcome to Lumen Christi. As we start our time together, I'd like to read from Matthew 18:6. At that time, the disciples approached Jesus and said, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom?" He called a child over, placed in their midst. He said, "Amen, I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever receives one child such as this in my name received me." But what's happening to our children, the innocence of our children? In today's society, we are being bombarded with sexually exploited, pornographic images everywhere we turn. The amount of pornography is absolutely staggering, and how it affects our mind, our bodies, our relationships, our finances. It's a true curse. Today we have with us a young man from Philadelphia who has an incredible story to share with us. Mark is a young man who has walked the walk of ensnarement by pornography. At the tender age of 11, he was captured and held in bondage there until he was 26 years old. Now married, father of 4, and the founder of the King's Men, a group that helps encourage masculine spirituality. I'm so happy to be able to share my new friend in Christ with you, brothers and sisters. This is Mark Houck.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for coming. About 6 months ago, I was privy to view a DVD that was called Out of the Darkness. And it was a documentary that featured 4 people, but the main storyline was the true story of Shelley Lumen, who was a porno queen, porno star during the 80s. And she chronicles her walk into this place of utter and complete darkness. Interspersed throughout this documentary, you chose to share with the community at large some very intimate details about how pornography entered into your life and the damage that it did. So would you be so kind to share with us? You were a mere 11 years old.
Yes, I was. Yeah, 5th, 6th grade. It's interesting, that storyline. Shelley has a tremendous journey, as you say, and I'm the porn addict in the film. I have that distinction. But our lives, though very different, are very similar in a lot of ways, in that when she was abused at 9 and I was abused through pornography at 11, and my dad passing away, which is no small part of this story.
Right.
At that time. He was buried on my 12th birthday. You start to see, as she journeyed and I journeyed, that we had these similar themes. I was a parallel story. Although I was not in the darkness in the way that she was, I was in my own darkness interiorly. And so at 11 years of age, I was exposed, like many a kid in the 80s, through magazines. I remember the first time, I can picture the first magazine I ever saw that was pornographic, where I was. Ocean City, New Jersey, and my world changed. My innocence was gone in an instant. And what was happening to me, I didn't understand at the time, but my neurochemistry was changing. That image is forever burned in my mind, and it is for anybody who looks at pornography, any man. And so I was captivated by that.
You said any man.
Yeah.
Does that chemical change have a difference in a woman?
Well, see, men are wired a little bit differently.
Right,
God
yes.
created us like as
Right,
be
visually
stimulated by the visual, right? So in a lot of ways, women are emotionally driven.
Right.
So that's why a trashy romance novel might be a little more pornographic. Although there are women who struggle with pornography, they're not necessarily attached to it the way the men would be because of the visual stimuli.
From the statistics I've been reading this week, the increase in women is quite startling. But please continue.
Right. So, and it is 1 out of 6 women. But anyhow, so at that point, there's something called the centerfold syndrome, and I had it bad at 11 years of age. And as things are happening in the family dynamic, and dad is dying. These are tough things for little boys to deal with. It's a very critical age in the masculine journey, 11, 12. And your boy really needs a father to calm him down. His body's changing. He's going through puberty. And you really need somebody to answer those hard questions. What's going on here? Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? Why is this image captivating me so much? Well, dad wasn't there to answer those questions, so you just kind of accept it. Or you look to your peers who are just as confused as you are, or your 2 older brothers, in my case, who are just as messed up further along in that journey, and that validates, oh, okay, this is normal. But there's always this element of secrecy, so you're not sharing this. So it immediately, when you're exposed to these things, it becomes this private experience. And so in that way, you start to not bring any light into your life, especially as a Catholic boy. I was going to Mass and stuff, but I knew wasn't right. You just knew intuitively it was wrong. This is written on my heart. This isn't right. So you hide these things, and so you're doing these things in secret. So for a good 6, 7 years, I just allowed myself to collect and receive whatever I could receive that was pornographic. And cable TV was coming into the home. That's where the kids are getting it these days, and certainly the internet. But at that time, it was just movies, home box office, and the pornographic magazines. And so by the time I got to end of high school and college, I had a full-blown addiction where I was struggling with this on a daily, weekly basis, looking at these things, and you bring in there the twin addiction, which is the masturbation with it. That's where you get an addiction. So you look at porn, that's one thing. You masturbate with porn, and you have an addiction. And so as a young boy, this is what happened. It became a chronic problem. And by the time I got to college football athlete, college football American, they had all these videos there. So the videos came into my life. So the image, which was now just on paper, became a real person because she was moving, but yet she wasn't real. But to me, it was close to the real thing as possible. So that made it even darker and more disordered.
Okay, let me ask you something there. So you've begun dating.
At the end of high school, yes,
Okay.
I did.
And this is the secret part of your life. Were you aware of how the engaging in this was affecting your intimacy or any aspect of your relationships with these girls?
No, absolutely not. You see, men can compartmentalize their life very well, and that's why we can go off to war. And like your father, I was reading his book, he could go off to war and come back and still be a normal functioning human being. So I could compartmentalize that and say, well, that's not who I am in relationship. But those thoughts and those ideas still slowly start to creep into your relationship. I didn't see that coming.
Did you find yourself, and I'm sure this is what every woman would want to know, did you find yourself comparing the person that you were with any of these images?
Eventually I did. Not initially, because it was just a fantasy world. But as you got older, and then you started to look at people and value people based upon how they look, and that's how I started to value people. That's why it gets so destructive, because if you didn't conform to the model or the image that I had in my mind of what was sexy or whatever, and these people aren't even real, they're cut and stitched into sexy, they're not even real people because they're airbrushed and all those things. But you don't know those things. So when you would see a real person, a real woman, it kind of was a letdown. And that's why men almost prefer the pornography over a real relationship. And that's how men become very isolated. And pornography is the temptation of the lonely.
I remembered you saying that in the movie, The Best Friend of the Lonely. And that stayed with me for days.
Mm-hmm.
you can see how it would isolate you.
It
But you
does.
can see how it would absolutely destroy a relationship. Because if you have these images and this person can't possibly meet up to those expectations, it would always leave you empty. Did you go through many, many relationships?
No, I didn't. I had my first girlfriend as a junior, senior in high school, and we dated for about 4.5 years. And and I had a good childhood. I had good formation. I was a good boy, and I was always the kid in the family that was the little prince or the little saint, the one that everyone thought would be a priest when he grew up, and I was a great athlete, if I can humbly say that. I did well. I did well in sports. So I had a lot of affirmation, and
So you were pretty balanced.
well, in that way I was, but this darkness, which no one knew about, just was, creating my spiritual life. My soul was I was dead. I was great on the outside, but I was dying spiritually. I was, really just a mess. And so it eventually started to distort, and that's eventually why that relationship ended, because the relationship turned sexual. It became physical, and a very good friendship ended because, we started to introduce these ideas. I remember the first time my wife and I, forgive me, Ryan Marie, my girlfriend, we watched a pornography film together, and we were both kind of like, what are we doing, And it was almost like, should we be doing this? Why are we doing this? And it's kind of just two innocent kids. And that was only one time, but it was just like touching, scratching the unknown, and what is this? Uncovering it. And then those thoughts and ideas come into your mind and your relationship, and you want to act out those things eventually. And then that's why men go to strip clubs, and they want to get as close to the real thing as possible. But eventually you bring that in the relationship, it's not going to last. And it didn't.
So you continue, and you're viewing, and you're continuing to indulge, and it was a daily addiction.
Yeah, so in my early 20s, and then the internet came, and then, well, there you go. We have the problem of today.
So you get to this place where all of a sudden you start feeling like this isn't right, or did you talk with somebody, or did you start to fall in love with somebody and you wanted something more to the relationship? What was the turning point?
I think God preserved me from a lot of people, and I was alone a lot. I was by myself a lot, and so that was a good thing. I didn't think about it at the time, but it actually fed the addiction because I was alone. But I think God kept people away so that they wouldn't be hurt. I just was hurting myself over and over again. So the turning point for me was just this desire to help other kids live a good life. And I started to look at myself. And I was volunteering at my church with the youth group, and I thought, we're telling these kids to be chaste. I'm not chaste. I'm working as a coach, as a counselor at a juvenile detention facility. And I'm like, these kids need virtue. And I knew it. I wasn't living it. But I got to walk the walk. And I wasn't at the time. There's thoughts of, in the film I talk about it, just despair. And I was always going to church, but I wasn't accessing the grace available to me. I wasn't praying. It was just a 911 prayer. So, I need something. Okay, give it to me, God. I didn't really have a relationship with God, with Christ. And so as I started to see, is this really what life's about? Is this what my life is? You start to have suicidal thoughts. Like,
This is a perfect time to stop and reintroduce you. We're speaking with Mark Houck from Philadelphia, who had a serious addiction, a pornographic addiction from the time he was 11 years old. He was featured recently in a documentary called Out of the Darkness, and it won the Merciful Love Award from the John Paul II Film Festival.
Right.
If you get the opportunity, get a hold of this disc. It's amazing. He's sharing with us some intimate details of his life. So you're at this place where you're living a kind of hypocrisy, and it's beginning to eat
Sure.
away at the fiber of who you are.
Sure.
And the despair is so grave that suicide seems
Well,
possible way.
the thought is just, if this is what my life is, then I don't really want this life. Now, I never really planned anything. I never really thought about what I would do. But those thoughts were there. And I was in touch with that because I was like lonely, empty. I didn't have anything to fill that. And eventually I got to the point when I was working with young people, coaching them football and wanting to be a good example to them, feeling I wasn't, I turned to the Lord. I had to. I had no other place to go to make myself feel better. I remember one time feeling really low in college. Something had happened at my friend's 21st birthday party. I felt like Satan literally grabbed me and just came into, well, just took over. He pulled me into a very uncomfortable situation at a 21st birthday party where there was a stripper. And I don't know why guys do these things. There were women there too. But they brought this stripper to this friend of mine, so-called friend of mine's 21st birthday party. Well, he, I guess, was telling the lady, grab certain people out of the audience. And she came and grabbed me and brought me on the floor and proceeded to do certain things that I share not with your audience. But I felt so dirty. I felt so unclean that the only place I knew, and I was going to the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C. at this time. Talk about hypocrisy. Only thing I knew to do was go to Sacrament of Reconciliation. That's the only thing I needed to make myself feel better. Thank God I knew that.
Let me ask you, as this is taking place, there's a crowd of people.
Yeah.
They're laughing and cheering you on.
Yeah, I'm sure. I was very embarrassed, I was very uncomfortable. But yet I just felt like, what do I do? I ran out of there. I mean, after, it was not very long, but I just went away. I just walked away. I got to get out of here. This is too dark. This is bad. My dad, what would my dad be thinking? What would my mom have to say if they saw me doing this? I just felt so low. To continue the story, I went to the local bar at the school, near the school. Don't want anyone to think Catholic University has a local bar on its campus, but there was this tavern or whatever that everyone would kind of end up at the end of the night. And this woman, who was a sophomore or freshman in college, throws herself at me. Like, I just want to go in and just be alone and sit in a corner and maybe have a soda or something. And she just literally throws herself on me. And she's like, take me home. I'm like, what? No, I don't want to do this, and it just got darker and darker. So I walked her home and to her dorm or whatever. Nothing happened. It's kind of like her big brother, but I just thought, man, this is really bad. What is our culture doing? So the next day, I went to confession. I just had to feel better because I felt awful. I felt like the worst human being in the world, and certainly there were worse things happening, but I felt like I couldn't go any lower. And so I walked out of confession feeling good. I wish it changed me. Didn't. But in the moment, I was changed. I went back to those same things. Never quite that dark, in that experience. But I indulged. And then, like I said, the internet came in. So about 26 years of age, I had enough of that. That was my life for the 4 or 5 years after college. Yeah, pursuing professional football and those things, and just getting caught up in what athletes were doing. And seeing, the Magic Johnsons of the world, the Michael Jordans of the world, and all the things that they were involved in, that we later found out they were involved in. And anyhow, I just said, enough. I can't do this anymore. And I just said, I'm going to make a commitment to be chaste. Now, how do you be chaste when you don't know how to be chaste? Mm-hmm. You have to teach yourself. You have to go back to the school of, when you were little, and right from wrong. Custody of your eyes, purity in your thoughts, and you really have to retrain your brain. And you have to detox is what you have to do.
Purge.
So you say, I don't want porn in my life, I don't want the masturbation. But if you don't have the rituals and the behaviors in place, it's just going to be continual temptation. So eventually, I had to just get rid of everything. I had to get rid of all the softcore pornography magazines. I had to get rid of phone books, if you can believe that. Sears catalogs. I mean, it was just bad.
I guess.
And I got rid of my television altogether. And I was living in the basement of my mom's home, and I just got rid of everything.
Now, you burnt and destroyed these things. You didn't pass them on to someone else.
Oh, all the stuff that was passable, other than the TV, I I got rid of. I threw out, or I didn't burn them. I took a hammer to some of the tapes or whatever. But it's very cleansing in a lot of ways, very freeing in a lot of ways, when you do things like that. So we did that, but it's amazing how Satan works. And, he finds a crack in the armor, the chink in the armor, and then, he gets back in there sometimes. So I was on this cycle of about a year or two where I was like, I want it and I don't want it, So it's just sin management, and at about 28 years of age, I got fed up even with that. It's like, we got to really start getting rid of all the behaviors that are leading to this. And internet's gone. Just detox. My home is a pure chaste home. I moved out and just had nothing. Had a bed, had the sofa, and nothing else. My home was chaste. It was pure. And I even got to the point where I had some old Sports Illustrated swimsuit magazines that were stuck in my trunk somewhere, tucked away in a room. I actually went to get them because in my mind I would think about them. I'm like, I know they're there. I got to go get them. I pull them out, and I'm like, maybe there's some value to these things. I'm like, no, there's no value here. So you just have to know yourself. Get rid of the PG-13 movies. I mean, anything that would trigger you. So I had to see where all these triggers were, and I had to identify my rituals. And I did. And I started to change my relationships to my friends, pick people that weren't going to tempt me in their thoughts or their actions, or even around women that would do that. And like I said, God kept these women away from me mostly. I would have a date or two. I was like a dating camel. I'd have a date a year, one date carried me for a full year, But that was never a good thing, because I would still go back to the old behaviors in that first date. So I needed to retrain how to even court a lady and be in a relationship. And so I did those things.
Did you feel that we've only got 5 minutes, and I just want to invite our audience to watch the second part of this series that we're doing with Mark. I just think that this is such an important topic in our current world. It's just so dark. It's so dark. Did you find when you were going through this purging, you were leaning on Christ for your strength?
Not initially. I mean, I was still going to Mass. I started to adopt the rosary, but I was living a double life still. I still was like, why isn't this working? I hadn't invited really Christ into that personal relationship yet, whereby he needs to fill me. Where Christ, it becomes for me, and this is where things really started to change, and there's more to it, we can get into that later, where I need to be satisfied with what Christ wanted to give me. Because
that's so hard sometimes, because
right.
we have our own aspirations and ideas.
That's right. And I needed to just say, you're enough. And he wasn't enough, because the world was telling me you need more. And I had to eventually say, okay, Lord, I whatever you want from me, I know that's going to make me happiest. And he brought me into the seminary. If you can believe that. I didn't want to go.
What a journey, yeah.
I didn't want to go. I was kicking and screaming the whole way. But charismatic renewal had come into my life at this point in 1995. So I was exposing myself to people who were walking the walk and who had painful lives that could speak to my pain and my broken hearts. And eventually, I started to have a personal relationship with Christ. And then I eventually started to figure out that the sacramental life is important too, not just on Sunday. And so as I was working with these kids at the detention facility and seeing the pain that they had and wanting to offer them more, and the kids that I was mentoring and coaching, I needed to start talking to these kids about these things. So I started to share my story. I get in a car with kids driving to a game, and they're like, all right, guys, turn on the radio. We're going to talk about our bodies and sex. This is 14, 15-year-old kids. Because I wish someone had talked to me about it.
Sure.
Remember, my dad wasn't
Sure,
there.
there was an absence, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I just said, hey, and I was learning all these things and talking to these kids about saving sex for marriage and why that's so important, how good their bodies are. Yes, you can do it. I believe in you. Don't believe what the world tells you. So I started to just transform my life through my story. And that's why I think that's one of the main ways we can be set free from pornography, is by sharing our story. That's why things like this are so powerful when we come together and share. Because every time we share it, we're impacting lives, and we're further becoming that person we want to be.
Yes, you're convicting yourself over
That's
and over
right.
and over. And I think people need to realize, anyone that's watching this that is either struggling themselves or has someone in their life that's struggling, confession. frees the soul. It gives us a new opportunity, brand new. He washes us clean. Our sins are as far from the east as the west.
Right.
And the reality is, pride is what generally keeps people from going to confession.
That's right.
There's no new sins under the sun. You know, none of us are that unique. It's the same stuff over and over.
That's right.
Don't deny yourself the opportunity to be cleansed and start again. Do you ever look back on this, and of course we'll get into this greater in this next segment, but do you ever look back on the time wasted and feel that, of course we'll be accountable for what we've done and what we failed to do, but do you ever look back on that time and sorrow over that and grieve the loss of those
Sense of
years?
loss.
Yeah.
I used to. I don't anymore. I think you have to go through that. It's like a mourning, you know, stages of death and a mourning, the loss. But I think eventually you have that acceptance, and that your journey today wouldn't be what it is if you didn't have that.
Right.
And the way that through the ministry that I work now and helping to help men be better men, and I wouldn't be able to do what I did without that story.
Right.
So I give thanks for it. In fact, it becomes a blessing. You know, it's the theology of the cross, right? The cross was a symbol of evil 2,000 years ago. Christ gets on one, and now it's redeemed. And so this cross, this wound that was my wound, my father wound initially, is a redeemed wound, and it's blessing the lives of many people, and my life, and my kids' life. So I give thanks for it, and for the journey.
It's a perfect time to thank you again. And I look forward to this next 30 minutes. I encourage everyone to share with your friends and family, to watch both these segments of Lumen Christi, but please check into getting a copy of Out of the Darkness.
Yes.
It's available online, and it will absolutely revolutionize your thoughts about the whole ensnarement that takes place through the darkness of pornography. And as always, remember to let Christ's light shine through you.